The story centers on an MMA fighter named Baylor, who is about to step into the ring to face his best friend in a match for a massive cash prize, and to prove who is truly the better fighter between them. The fight begins with Johnny completely dominating the match. Even Baylor is pushed into a desperate situation by Johnny's relentless attacks, one after another. After losing 3 consecutive rounds, Baylor begins to fight more strategically, slowing the pace to look for a chance to turn the tables. He lands a devastating kick to Johnny's head, knocking him unconscious for a long time. The organizers immediately stop the fight, and Johnny is rushed straight to the hospital. Witnessing this, Baylor is overwhelmed with fear and deep regret, afraid he may lose his closest friend forever. After months of treatment with no improvement, Johnny eventually passes away due to severe brain trauma beyond any chance of recovery. Johnny's death completely shatters Baylor, leaving him haunted by overwhelming guilt. He decides to retire from MMA and move to Thailand to seek peace and forget the tragic accident he caused. Despite announcing his retirement from MMA, Baylor still cannot completely leave the fighting world. The passion and skill that define who he is. In Thailand, he frequently joins underground fights, organized by gambling rings, attended by extremely wealthy businessmen, who seem to have no idea how else to spend their money because of their excess wealth, with no skills other than fighting. Baylor survives by competing in these matches, moving from one arena to another, earning prize money with each victory. Until one day, while Baylor is fighting, the audience is introduced to a wealthy coal tycoon named Android. This man has long taken notice of Baylor and deeply admires his fighting abilities. After the match ends, Andre immediately approaches and invites Baylor to participate in a fight in Myanmar, with a prize of up to $500,000. At first, Baylor refuses the offer from a stranger, but he suddenly remembers the unfulfilled dream of his late friend Johnny. Before their final match, Johnny once dreamed of buying a small seaside house to atone for his guilt and ease his conscience. Baylor begins to reconsider Android's offer to fulfill his friend's final wish at any cost. The next day, Baylor visits Android's mansion to discuss details. He agrees to take part in the fight, but win or lose, Android must pay double the original amount promised. After reaching an agreement, they immediately fly to Myanmar. Baylor expects to arrive at a ring or a steel cage, as usual, but Android instead lands him in the middle of a jungle, where several people are already waiting. When they reach a village, Android is warmly welcomed by soldiers and a general, who appears to be very familiar with him. Not only that, Android also hands Baylor a suitcase full of cash with an unclear purpose. He then introduces Baylor to his associates, all of whom are professional hunters, and finally announces a reward of up to $1 million for a hunt that Baylor hasn't even joined yet. Seeing Baylor still confused, Android finally reveals the truth. He deliberately rented a 26,000-hectare island from the general to turn it into a hunting arena, including hiring 4 professional hunters for the game. And the prey they will hunt is none other than Baylor. At that moment, Baylor is utterly stunned. Baylor is completely shocked, unable to believe what Android has just said. Seeing that Baylor still thinks this is a joke, Android immediately orders the hunters to choose any weapons they like, then drags out 2 innocent civilians as test subjects to demonstrate this brutal game. The truth is, Android deliberately lured Baylor into this nightmare, simply to satisfy his savage instincts. He is already accustomed to hunting humans. But seeing a strong, resilient man, Android wants to experience something new by making Baylor the main target, hoping to create a more thrilling, adrenaline-fueled hunt than ever before. Baylor tries to leave, but is immediately blocked by the soldiers, leaving him with no other choice but to take part in the game. Before releasing Baylor into the jungle, Android hands him an empty bottle to fill with water. When he gets thirsty, the only way for Baylor to survive is to swim off the island before the hunters find him. Right after Baylor escapes, the film introduces one of the hunters, nicknamed the Cowboy, who is taking selfies. As evidence, Android immediately yells and confiscates his phone, then seizes all the other hunters' phones to prevent them from contacting anyone or recording any evidence of their crimes. The hunt begins as the hunters enter the jungle, quickly discovering Baylor's escape trail, forcing them to split up to surround their prey. Meanwhile, Baylor reaches a river to refill his bottle with water. That's when a horrifying sight appears. He discovers the floating corpse of a man in the water, with 2 arrows lodged in his back. Baylor immediately moves to the opposite bank, Fortunately, a shot fired by the cowboy from above the waterfall misses, only shattering Baylor's water bottle. Enraged, the cowboy quickly jumps down, but is instantly ambushed by Baylor from beneath the water. Despite his skill with firearms, in close combat, he is no match for an MMA champion like Baylor. Not long after, Android arrives and finds the cowboy brutally killed. Realizing this prey is far from easy, Android orders the remaining hunters to use firearms and never split up during the hunt. However, Android doesn't know that a hunter named Mason has secretly recorded the entire hunt. His true identity and motives remain unknown. A bald hunter accidentally spots Baylor hiding behind a rock and preparing to flee, prompting the group to open fire on him. Miraculously, Baylor survives after being thrown into the body of an elephant standing nearby. Moments later, a girl named Tada appears. Seeing a stranger, she grows suspicious of why he is here. Baylor explains that he is being hunted, and they are ready to kill him without hesitation. Therefore, he must reach the border to escape this cursed island. Knowing Baylor is in grave danger, Tada kindly offers to guide him. As a local who grew up here, she knows every corner of the jungle, including the hunters Baylor mentioned. In fact, Tada is on a mission of her own, searching for her older brother, who has been missing after being chased by the hunters. This deeply shocks her, because it's the first time an outsider has become prey for those ruthless hunters. Not far from Baylor's location, the hunters begin to grow exhausted from constant movement without finding any sign of him. They complain that this is the first time they've ever faced such a difficult prey. Given the situation, Android calls in the military and orders a mechanized hunt, while he and the hunters use drones and tracking devices to locate Baylor. Meanwhile, Baylor is nearing the edge of the island, just a short distance from the border. After everything Tada has done to help him, Baylor tells her that bringing him this far is enough. He doesn't want Tada to be dragged deeper into danger. However, it's already too late, as the hunters have discovered both of them and immediately give chase. On motorcycles, Baylor deliberately lures a hunter named Sophia to chase after him, to create a chance for Tada to hide safely. Eventually, they reach an abandoned building. Sophia confidently gets off her bike and challenges Baylor to a one-on-one fight. Not realizing it's a fatal mistake, the fight ends quickly. With Sophia knocked out cold, Baylor immediately rushes back to find Tada, who is still panicking and searching for a hiding place. At that moment, something unexpected happens, when another hunter spots Tada and instantly takes her hostage. Witnessing his father's growing brutality, Tobias can no longer endure it and decides to leave, refusing to be part of such depraved acts. What happens next to Tada remains unclear, but Tobias chooses to wait outside until his father finishes his twisted actions. Just then, Baylor appears and instantly takes down Jacob. He rescues Tada and quickly leads her away. They walk several more kilometers before stopping at an abandoned house. Seeing that Baylor's shoulder wound is severe, Tada prepares herbal medicine to treat it, preventing the wound from becoming infected. After partially recovering, they continue onward. Baylor suddenly smells something burning and discovers the charred remains of an animal. Tada then realizes that the land they're standing on is filled with dozens of active landmines, still armed, planted by Android to terrorize the villagers. Trapped inside this deadly minefield, their situation becomes even more hopeless when Android and his men arrive and pinpoint Baylor's location. Overcome with rage and grief over his father's death, Tobias recklessly charges into the minefield alone, firing wildly as he runs. Eventually, after all the mines explode, Baylor and Tada seize the chance to escape, temporarily shaking off the hunters. Knowing the border is still far away, Tada leads Baylor to a cave, where villagers often come to pray and rest. There, an unexpected coincidence occurs when Baylor reunites with Tada's brother, named Win, who turns out to be alive, having escaped Android's hunt, along with his men, a few days earlier. The next morning, Baylor wakes up to find himself alone. Tada and Win are gone, along with the waste pouch containing the ruby stones he had been carrying. Baylor immediately goes searching for them, unaware that Tada and Win have been captured by Android and his men, with plans to execute them on the railroad tracks. However, Android doesn't realize that beneath the tracks, Mason is secretly recording everything they do. At that moment, Baylor suddenly appears, quickly disarming Mason and seizing both the gun and the camera. Without hesitation, Baylor drags Mason up to confront Android and proposes a deal. If Android releases Tata and win, Baylor will spare Mason's life. However, what Android truly wants is Baylor dead. So he readily agrees to release Tata and win. But an unexpected twist follows. Android secretly orders Sophia to kill them. During their retreat, realizing her brother is still injured, Tata desperately pushes Win into the river to save his life, promising to reunite after dealing with Sophia herself. After killing Sophia and jumping into the river to find Win, Baylor is left unsure how to escape this desperate situation. With no time to hesitate and risk being shot by Android, Baylor makes an extremely risky decision. He leaps straight off the bridge into the deep river below and miraculously survives. Once again, Android and his men fail to kill Baylor, only discovering Sophia's body, left in horrific condition by the riverbank. While fleeing, Baylor plays back the camera he took from Mason. It contains full evidence of the brutal human hunting operations run by Android and his crew. Baylor immediately removes the memory card and hides it safely. At this point, Tata admits she took Baylor's rubies to bribe the general in order to free the villagers who had been bought off by Android, hoping the general would put an end to all of Android's madness. Not long after, Android arrives at the riverbank and discovers that Mason's camera is missing its memory card. Realizing Mason is the traitor, Android kills him on the spot in a rage. He declares that now Baylor holds footage capable of sending them all to prison. Therefore, Android orders the last remaining hunters to pursue Baylor immediately and retrieve the memory card at all costs. Using the tracking device, Android discovers that Baylor is not far from his current position. This deeply confuses Baylor, because no matter where he goes, Android always manages to track him down, except for the time inside the cave. That's when Baylor realizes Android planted a tracking chip inside the rubies he was carrying. Baylor immediately removes the tracking chip and hands all the rubies to Tata, who needs them more than he does. He decides to head for the border alone. However, Baylor is quickly detected by Android, who immediately mobilizes soldiers to hunt him down. Meanwhile, Tata and Win fail to hide in time and are spotted by the hunter Pato. Unwilling to keep running in vain, Win grows sick of all this madness and faces Pato alone. But when he is easily overpowered, Tata, enraged, attacks Pato from behind with an empty plastic container. This reckless act worsens the situation, forcing Tata to retreat. The story shifts back to Baylor, who is relentlessly pursued by Android and the army. He narrowly dodges relentless gunfire, almost getting hit. The chase only ends when soldiers disable Baylor's boat engine, forcing him to shore, where he faces the waiting forces head-on. Unfortunately for Baylor, just as he is close to the border, Android and the hunter intercept him. They use dirty tricks to lure Baylor out of hiding. Unwilling to let more innocent people die, Baylor steps out openly and challenges Android to a fistfight. However, Android proves to be a cowardly, immoral man. All talk and no action. He orders 5 henchmen to attack Baylor at once. What follows is inevitable. Baylor easily defeats the entire group without breaking a sweat. Even when the hunter uses a weapon, he stands no chance against Baylor, the legendary MMA fighter, who knocks him out with the signature kick. But it doesn't stop there. Baylor unleashes his rage and completely overwhelms Android. His fury only subsides when the general and soldiers arrive, ordering Baylor to stop the violence. At that moment, Android demands that the general order Baylor's execution. Just in time, Tata appears and presents a bag full of rubies in exchange for Baylor's freedom. Tempted by this priceless fortune, the general immediately agrees, ordering the soldiers to lower their weapons and let Baylor go. Android refuses to accept this decision and recklessly draws his gun, sealing his own fate. After everything ends and the general withdraws his troops, Tata quietly approaches Baylor, handing him a handful of rubies as travel money. It turns out that before giving the rubies to the general, Tata secretly kept half of them, and that marks the end